The November wind cut through Denver's streets like a knife, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. 17-year-old Marcus Webb pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his thin frame, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid afternoon air. Beside him, a scruffy German shepherd mix named Duke walked with unwavering loyalty, his brown eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with protective vigilance. Marcus had been on his own for 8 months now, 243 days to be exact. He counted them obsessively, each one a small victory of survival. After his mother's death from cancer and no other family willing to take him in, the foster system had felt like a cage he couldn't breathe in, so he'd run, choosing the uncertain freedom of the streets over the suffocating structure of temporary homes where he never belonged. The pair made their way down Colfax Avenue, past the closed storefronts and the few pedestrians who hurried by without making eye contact. Marcus had learned early that invisibility was a survival skill. Don't make trouble, don't draw attention, and maybe, just maybe, you'd make it through another day. In his pocket, his fingers curled around 3 crumpled dollar bills and a handful of change, $2.67. The sum total of 3 days of collecting cans and bottles, of standing outside the King Soopers with a cardboard sign, of the occasional act of kindness from strangers who actually saw him as human. Duke nudged his hand with a cold nose, and Marcus smiled despite everything. The dog had found him, or maybe he'd found the dog, 4 months ago, both of them scrounging behind a restaurant on East Colfax. Duke had been just as skinny and desperate, his ribs showing through his matted fur. They'd shared a half-eaten burger that night, and neither had left the other's side since. "I know, buddy," Marcus murmured, scratching behind Duke's ears. "We'll figure something out. We always do." But the truth was getting harder to ignore. Winter was coming fast, and the shelter he'd been sleeping in, an abandoned loading dock behind a closed warehouse, wouldn't cut it once the real cold arrived. He'd already woken up twice, with his fingers so numb he couldn't feel them, panic setting in until the blood flow returned. As they walked, Marcus noticed a small crowd gathered around a vacant lot on the corner of Colfax and Josephine. Curiosity pulled him closer, Duke trotting beside him. A hand-painted sign caught his attention. "Estate liquidation. Everything must go. Make an offer." The lot was a graveyard of forgotten things. Rusted bicycles, stained furniture, boxes of books with water-damaged covers, and various pieces of junk that looked like they'd been pulled from someone's garage or basement. An elderly man sat in a folding chair near the entrance, a metal cash box resting on his lap. His weathered face suggested a lifetime of hard work, and his eyes held a sadness that Marcus recognized, the look of someone letting go of pieces of the past. Marcus moved through the lot slowly, Duke staying close to his leg. Most of it was worthless to someone in his situation, but habits died hard. His mother had loved estate sales and thrift stores, always convinced that treasure could be found in other people's trash. "One person's ending is another person's beginning," she used to say, her eyes lighting up as she sorted through boxes of old dishes or vintage clothing. The memory made his chest ache. Near the back of the lot, partially hidden behind a stack of moldy boxes and a broken dresser, Marcus spotted it. A small camping trailer. Well, calling it a trailer was generous. It was more like a rusted metal shell on wheels, probably from the 1970s, with faded blue paint peeling off in long strips. One of the windows was cracked, and the door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. It looked like it had been sitting in someone's backyard for decades, forgotten and slowly returning to the earth. But something about it caught Marcus's attention. Maybe it was the desperate hope that had been growing in his chest as the temperature dropped each night. Maybe it was the memory of his mother's voice telling him that everything had potential if you looked hard enough. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that it had 4 walls and a roof, which was more than he had now. "How much for the trailer?" Marcus called out to the old man, his voice cracking slightly from disuse. He didn't talk much these days. There was rarely anyone to talk to. The man looked up, squinting in Marcus's direction. He took in the teenager's worn clothes, the dirty backpack, the loyal dog, and his expression shifted to something that might have been pity or understanding. That old thing. The man stood slowly, his joints creaking with age. He walked over, studying the trailer with a critical eye. Been sitting in my brother's yard for 30 years. He passed last month, and I'm trying to clear out his property. Honestly, kid, I'd be doing myself a favor if someone hauled it away. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. I don't have much money, he admitted, the honesty feeling both vulnerable and necessary. But I could really use it, even just for storage or something. The old man was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Marcus and Duke. The dog sat perfectly still, as if understanding that this moment mattered. Tell you what, the man said finally, give me $1 and it's yours. Consider it sold. Marcus stared at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. $1? Really? Really. But you've got to move it yourself. And son? The man's voice softened. Whatever you're running from or running toward, I hope that old trailer serves you well. With trembling hands, Marcus pulled out one of his 3 precious dollar bills and handed it over. The logistics of moving a rusted trailer when you're a homeless teenager with no car, no license, and $2.67 to your name would have seemed impossible to most people. But Marcus had learned that impossible was just another word for requires creativity. The old man, who'd introduced himself as Harold Peterson, had watched with barely concealed concern as Marcus examined his purchase in the fading afternoon light. The trailer was in worse shape up close than it had appeared from a distance. The tires were completely flat, rotted rubber that would need replacing before the thing could roll anywhere. The hitch was so rusted that Marcus wasn't sure it would even connect to a vehicle, and the entire structure leaned slightly to the left, like it was tired of standing upright. You got a plan for getting this moved? Harold had asked, his bushy eyebrows raised skeptically. Marcus had nodded, though his plan was barely more than a desperate hope. There's a guy who hangs out near the homeless camp under the overpass on Brighton Boulevard. He's got a truck. Maybe I can work something out with him. Harold had studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Look, kid, I'm going to level with you. I've got a nephew with a pickup and a trailer hitch. He owes me a favor. Give me your word you're not going to do anything stupid or illegal with this thing, and I'll have him move it for you. Where do you need it? The unexpected kindness had nearly broken something in Marcus. He'd become so used to being invisible, to being dismissed or ignored, that genuine help felt almost painful to accept. His throat had tightened, and he'd had to look away before answering. There's an abandoned lot off Arkins Court, he'd said quietly. Industrial area. Nobody really goes there. The owner died years ago, and it's been tied up in some legal dispute. There are a few other people camping there, but they keep to themselves. Harold had made a phone call, and 2 hours later, as the sun set over the Rocky Mountains in a blaze of orange and purple, Marcus stood in the weedy lot, watching his trailer being unhitched from a blue Ford F-150. Harold's nephew, a taciturn man in his 30s named Derek, had barely said 10 words during the entire process, but he'd been efficient and professional. You need anything else? Derek had asked, his eyes not quite meeting Marcus's. No, sir. Thank you. Really? Derek had nodded once, climbed back into his truck, and driven away, leaving Marcus alone with Duke and his $1 investment. Now, in the gathering darkness, Marcus stood before the trailer's crooked door, Duke sitting patiently beside him. Around them, the lot stretched empty and desolate, a forgotten patch of urban wasteland surrounded by chain-link fence and overlooked by the distant lights of downtown Denver. In the far corner, he could see the glow of a small fire where 2 other people had set up camp, but they hadn't approached or shown any interest in the new arrival. The door's handle was crusty with rust and took considerable effort to turn. The hinges screamed in protest as Marcus pulled it open, and Duke immediately pushed past him, disappearing into the darkness inside. "Duke, wait!" Marcus called, but the dog was already moving through the interior, his nails clicking on the metal floor. Marcus pulled out his phone, a battered smartphone he'd managed to keep charged using public library outlets and the occasional sympathetic business owner, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the trailer's interior. It was worse than he'd imagined, and somehow better at the same time. The space was tiny, maybe 8 feet by 12 feet, with a ceiling so low that Marcus, at 5'9", would have to duck in places. Water damage stained the walls and ceiling in abstract patterns of brown and yellow. The built-in furniture, a small bench seat that probably converted to a bed, a few overhead cabinets, and a miniature sink, was all covered in a thick layer of dust and grime. The smell was a mixture of mildew, old rubber, and decades of stagnation, but it had walls, a ceiling, a door that closed, windows that, despite the crack in one, could potentially be covered. For someone who'd been sleeping on concrete and cardboard for 8 months, it looked like a palace. Duke was sniffing everything with intense concentration, moving from corner to corner with his nose to the ground. His tail wagged occasionally, then stopped, then wagged again. He seemed particularly interested in the back corner of the trailer, near what appeared to be a small closet or storage compartment. "What you got there, boy?" Marcus asked, making his way deeper into the trailer. The floor creaked under his weight, but held firm. Duke pawed at the closet door, which was stuck shut. He looked back at Marcus and whined, a sound that meant he'd found something important. In their months together, Marcus had learned to trust Duke's instincts. The dog had warned him about dangerous people, led him to discarded food, and once alerted him to a fire in a nearby building before the smoke became visible. Marcus knelt down, examining the closet door. It was swollen with moisture and age, wedged tight into its frame. He pulled his pocket knife from his backpack, a multi-tool his mother had given him for his 16th birthday, one of the few possessions he'd managed to keep, and worked the blade into the gap between the door and frame. It took several minutes of careful prying, but finally the door gave way with a sound like cracking wood. It swung open, and Duke immediately stuck his head into the dark space, tail wagging furiously. Marcus shined his light into the closet, and his breath caught in his throat. There, pushed against the back wall and covered in dust, was a locked metal box about the size of a shoebox. It was old but sturdy, with a combination lock that looked like it had been manufactured decades ago, and next to it, almost invisible in the shadows, was what appeared to be a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Marcus sat on the grimy floor of his new trailer, the metal box and journal laid out before him in the circle of light from his phone. Duke had settled next to him, his head resting on Marcus's leg, occasionally glancing at the discoveries with what seemed like canine approval. Outside, full darkness had fallen over Denver. The temperature was dropping fast. Marcus could already feel the cold seeping through the trailer's thin metal walls. But for the first time in months, he had shelter. Real shelter. And apparently he had a mystery too. He picked up the journal first, handling it carefully. The leather cover was cracked and faded, but when he opened it, the pages inside were surprisingly well preserved. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, written in blue ink that had faded to a lighter shade but remained legible. The first page bore a date, June 15th, 1978. "This trailer has been my home for 3 summers now," the entry began. "Every year, when school ends, Dad hitches it to the station wagon and we drive from Denver to wherever the wind takes us. This year, it's Yellowstone. Mom says I should keep a journal of our adventures, so here it is. My name is Thomas Peterson. I'm 12 years old, and this is my story." Marcus felt a strange connection to those words. Another person who'd found refuge in this small metal space, even if their circumstances had been vastly different. He flipped through several pages, finding entries about camping trips, fishing expeditions, family dinners cooked on a portable stove. The writing painted a picture of happy summers, of a boy who loved adventure and the open road. But as he continued reading, the entries changed in tone. The dates jumped forward several years. August 3rd, 1984. "I'm 18 now, and this is the last summer I'll probably spend in this trailer. College starts in a month. Dad's getting older, and Mom says they're going to sell the trailer after I leave. I can't explain why this makes me so sad. It's just metal and rust, but it holds every good memory of my childhood. Before I go, I'm leaving something here. A time capsule, I guess. Maybe someday someone will find it and know that a kid named Thomas lived a pretty good life in this little space. Marcus's heart raced as he set down the journal and turned his attention to the metal box. The combination lock had 3 digits, each wheel numbered from 0 to 9. He had no idea what the combination might be, but something made him flip back through the journal, looking for clues. There, in one of the early entries, Thomas had written about his birthday. "Today's my 12th birthday, October 5th. Mom made my favorite chocolate cake. October 5th, 10-5. But that was only 2 digits. Marcus kept reading, searching. Another entry caught his eye. "My lucky number has always been 7. Dad says it's because I was born on the 5th day of the 10th month at 7 in the evening. 10-5-7, that's me." It was a long shot, but Marcus had nothing to lose. He turned the dials carefully. 1-0-0-5-7. He tried to open it, but the lock held firm. He tried different combinations using those numbers. 7, 5, 10, 5, 7, 10, 10, 7, 5. Nothing worked. Frustrated, he set the box down and picked up the journal again, flipping to the very last entry. "If you're reading this, stranger, then you've found my secret. The combination is the year we bought this trailer, just the last 3 digits. Good luck, and I hope whatever you find helps you on your journey. Thomas Peterson." Marcus's mind raced. The trailer looked like it was from the 1970s, and the journal started in 1978. He tried 9-7-8, nothing, then 9-7-7, nothing. He was about to try 9-7-6 when something occurred to him. If Thomas wrote that entry in 1984 at age 18, and he'd been 12 in 1978, then 6 years before 1978 would be 1972. He set the dials to 9-7-2. The lock clicked open. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags that had yellowed with age but kept their contents dry, he found several items. His breath caught as he carefully removed them one by one. First, there was a stack of old photographs, pictures of a young boy who must have been Thomas, smiling next to the trailer with what appeared to be his parents. Happy faces, frozen in time, preserved in fading colors. Second, there was a small collection of old coins, nothing that looked particularly valuable, but they were in pristine condition, carefully organized in a cardboard folder. Third, and most surprising, there was an envelope. Written on the front in the same neat handwriting was simply, "To whoever finds this." With Duke watching curiously, Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, written on lined paper and something else. Several crisp bills folded together. He unfolded the letter first and began to read. "Dear friend, if you've found this box, then you've probably found this old trailer too. I hope it's serving you well, whatever you need it for. I'm leaving this here because this trailer was a place of beginnings for me. Every summer was a new adventure, a new start. I'm leaving these things as a gift for whoever might need a new beginning themselves. The coins aren't worth much, but my grandfather gave them to me, and they're lucky. Consider them yours now. The photos are just memories. You can keep them or throw them away. They're from a time when life felt simple and good. The money is for something practical. It's not a fortune, but maybe it'll help with whatever challenge you're facing. Use it wisely, use it well, and when you're in a position to do so someday, pass the kindness forward to someone else who needs it. Remember, every ending is just another beginning waiting to happen. Your friend across time, Thomas Peterson." With trembling fingers, Marcus unfolded the bills. There were 5 of them, all $50 bills, $250. He stared at the money, then at Duke, then back at the money. It was more cash than he'd held in 8 months, more than enough to buy proper food for both of them, enough to get Duke to a vet for a checkup, enough to buy winter supplies, maybe even a space heater for the trailer. Duke nuzzled his hand, and Marcus realized his cheeks were wet with tears. "We're going to be okay, buddy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We're actually going to be okay." The first thing Marcus did the next morning was take Duke to a veterinary clinic on Federal Boulevard. He'd researched it on his phone the night before, a place that offered low-cost services and had good reviews for being compassionate with people in difficult circumstances. The November sun was pale and weak as they walked the 2 miles from the lot to the clinic, but Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The $250 was safely divided, some in his pocket, some hidden in his shoe, and some tucked into a tear in Duke's collar that Marcus had carefully sewn shut. His mother had taught him never to keep all his money in one place. The veterinary clinic was a modest single-story building with a faded sign that read Paws and Claws Community Vet. Inside, the waiting room smelled of antiseptic and dog treats. A young receptionist with kind eyes looked up as they entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her gaze taking in Marcus's worn appearance without judgment. "I need to get my dog checked out," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I don't have a lot of money, but I can pay something." The receptionist smiled. "We work with people on payment plans. Let me get you some paperwork to fill out." An hour later, Marcus sat in an examination room while a middle-aged veterinarian named Dr. Sarah Chen examined Duke with gentle, efficient hands. The dog submitted to the prodding and poking with patience, occasionally glancing at Marcus for reassurance. "He's underweight," Dr. Chen said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "And he's got some dental issues that we should keep an eye on, but overall, considering his circumstances, he's in decent shape. You've been taking good care of him." Marcus felt his throat tighten at the unexpected validation. "I try, he's all I've got." Dr. Chen looked at him then, really looked at him, and her expression softened. "How old are you, son?" 17. "I'll be 18 in February." She was quiet for a moment, continuing her examination of Duke. "He needs vaccinations, and I'd recommend a deworming treatment. He's also got some fleas that we should address. Altogether, we're looking at about $60 with our low-income discount." Marcus nodded, reaching into his pocket. It was a significant chunk of his newfound wealth, but Duke deserved proper care. "I can do that." As Dr. Chen prepared the treatments, she spoke without looking at Marcus. "There's a food bank on Morrison Road that also distributes pet food on Thursdays. And if you ever need to bring Duke back in, ask for me, specifically. I'll make sure we work something out." "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "Really, thank you." After the vet visit, Marcus stopped at a Walmart, Duke waiting patiently tied to a bike rack outside with a bowl of water Marcus had bought from a vending machine. Inside the store, Marcus moved through the aisles with careful deliberation, mentally calculating every purchase. Dog food, a 20-pound bag that would last several weeks. A warm blanket from the clearance section, a small space heater with a timer and safety shutoff, extension cords, a pack of LED candles for light that wouldn't be a fire hazard, cleaning supplies, bleach, sponges, trash bags, a padlock for the trailer door, 2 gallons of water, ramen noodles, peanut butter, bread, canned soup, a can opener, disposable razors, soap. Each item was chosen with purpose, nothing frivolous, everything essential. At the checkout, the total came to $143. Marcus handed over the cash, watching his safety net shrink, but knowing these were investments in survival. The walk back to the trailer took longer with all his purchases, but Duke seemed energized by his vet visit and trotted alongside Marcus with renewed vigor. When they reached the lot, Marcus noticed something that hadn't been there that morning. Someone had left a small camping stove and a dented pot near his trailer door, with a note weighted down by a rock. The note, written in shaky handwriting, simply said, "Saw you move in yesterday. Welcome to the neighborhood. The stove works if you've got propane. Lou." Marcus looked toward the far corner of the lot where he'd seen the fire the night before. An elderly man with a long grey beard sat in a folding chair, reading a paperback book. He glanced up, met Marcus's eyes, and gave a small nod before returning to his reading. The gesture, small as it was, touched something deep in Marcus's chest. Even here, in this forgotten corner of the city, there was community, there was kindness. For the rest of the day, Marcus threw himself into making the trailer livable. He started by carrying bucket after bucket of water from a working spigot he'd discovered near the lot's entrance, using it to scrub every surface of the trailer's interior. The grime of decades came away slowly, revealing metal and faded vinyl underneath. Duke supervised from outside, having claimed a sunny spot next to the trailer where the afternoon light warmed the ground. He dozed contentedly, his belly full of proper dog food for the first time in months. As Marcus worked, he found himself thinking about Thomas Peterson and the family that had once made memories in this space. He imagined a younger version of the trailer, clean and new, filled with laughter and the smell of camping food. He wondered where Thomas was now, if he was still alive, if he had children of his own, if he ever thought about the summers he'd spent in this little metal box on wheels. By evening, the trailer looked almost habitable. Marcus had hung the blanket over the cracked window for privacy and insulation. The space heater sat in the corner, ready to use once night fell. The cabinets, now clean, held his modest food supplies. The LED candles provided gentle light that made the space feel less like a rusty shell and more like a home. Marcus stood outside, looking at his work, Duke now awake and sitting beside him. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Downtown Denver glittered in the distance, a world that had seemed so hostile now, feeling just a bit less cold. "We did good today, Duke," Marcus said, reaching down to scratch the dog's head. "Real good." Duke's tail thumped against the ground in agreement. For the first time in 8 months, Marcus felt something he'd almost forgotten the shape of: hope. 3 weeks passed, and Marcus fell into a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Each morning, he woke before dawn in his trailer, Duke curled up beside him on the makeshift bed he'd created from the converted bench seat and his new blanket. The space heater kept the worst of the cold at bay, though frost still formed on the inside of the windows by morning. He'd learned to navigate the delicate balance of homeless survival in winter. The public library on Broadway became his daytime refuge. Warm, safe, with bathrooms and electrical outlets where he could charge his phone. He discovered that if he actually read the books and used the computers for their intended purpose, the staff didn't bother him. One librarian, a woman named Mrs. Rodriguez with reading glasses on a beaded chain, had even started recommending books to him. "You like science fiction?" she'd asked one afternoon, noticing him returning a worn copy of Ender's Game. "Yeah, I guess. It's an escape." She'd smiled knowingly and handed him The Martian. "Try this one. It's about survival and problem-solving. I think you'll appreciate it." She had no idea how right she was. Marcus had also found part-time work, cash under the table, nothing official, but enough to supplement Thomas's gift. A Vietnamese restaurant owner named Mr. Nguyen on South Federal had hired him to wash dishes 3 evenings a week after Marcus had cautiously asked if they needed help. Mr. Nguyen had taken one look at Marcus and Duke waiting outside, then nodded. "You work hard, you show up on time, I pay you $8 an hour, cash. You eat 1 meal each shift, whatever we make that day. Your dog, he stays outside, but I give him food too. Deal?" "Deal," Marcus had said, barely able to believe his luck. The work was hot, exhausting, and monotonous. 3 hours of standing at an industrial sink, scrubbing pots and plates while steam rose around him, and the sounds of rapid Vietnamese and sizzling woks filled the kitchen. But it was honest work, and at the end of each shift, Mr. Nguyen would hand him $24 in small bills, plus containers of leftover pho or rice with grilled pork for both him and Duke. "You good kid," Mr. Nguyen had told him after the first week. "You keep showing up, you keep job. Simple." It was simple, and Marcus clung to that simplicity like a lifeline. On his days off from the restaurant, Marcus explored the city with Duke, always keeping his eyes open for other opportunities. He collected cans for recycling, returned lost shopping carts to stores for the quarter deposits, and occasionally held signs at busy intersections, though he hated the way some people looked through him like he wasn't there. But some people did see him, like the elderly woman who'd given him $10 and a bag of homemade cookies outside a King Soopers, or the construction worker who'd handed him a new pair of work gloves after noticing Marcus's fingers were chapped and raw from the coal. Or Harold Peterson, who'd stopped by the lot one afternoon in his old Buick to check on how Marcus was doing. "Just wanted to see if you were managing okay," Harold had said, his eyes scanning the trailer that now looked considerably more cared for than when he'd sold it. "Looks like you've fixed the place up some." "I'm managing," Marcus had replied, standing a little straighter. "Thank you again for helping me move it here." Harold had nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket. "Look, I know you've got your pride, and I respect that, but I'm an old man with no kids of my own, and Christmas is coming. Consider this an early present." He'd held out an envelope. Marcus had wanted to refuse, but something in Harold's expression, a loneliness that mirrored his own, made him accept. "Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it." Inside the envelope had been $100 and a note. "You remind me of my brother when he was young, stubborn, independent but good-hearted. Use this wisely," says HP. The coincidence of the initials hadn't been lost on Marcus. HP Harold Peterson, TP Thomas Peterson, the trailer that had belonged to Harold's brother Thomas, the same Thomas who'd written the journal and left the time capsule. The next day, Marcus had worked up the courage to ask Harold about it when the old man returned, to drop off a small propane tank for the camping stove Lou had given him. "Harold," Marcus had started carefully, "your brother's name was Thomas, right? Thomas Peterson." Harold's eyebrows had risen in surprise. "How did you know that?" Marcus had retrieved the journal from the trailer and handed it to Harold with reverent care. "I found this inside, and a box. He left them as a kind of time capsule." Harold's hands had trembled as he opened the journal, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. For a long moment he'd said nothing, just stood there reading passages from a brother he'd lost, tears streaming silently down his weathered cheeks. "Thomas died 5 years ago," Harold had said finally, his voice thick. "Heart attack. He was only 56. We'd grown apart over the years. Life, you know, it gets in the way. But we were close when we were kids. These camping trips," he gestured to the journal, "these were the best times of our lives, before everything got complicated." Marcus had stayed quiet, letting Harold process his emotions. "He was a good man, my brother," Harold had continued. "Became a teacher, worked with at-risk youth. He would have liked you, Marcus. Would have been proud that his old trailer is helping someone who needs it." After Harold left that day, Marcus had added the journal to his small collection of precious possessions. It felt important to preserve it, this connection across time between two people who'd both found refuge in the same small space. That night, lying in his trailer with Duke snoring softly beside him, Marcus had pulled out his own phone and started a digital journal of his own. If someone found his story someday, he wanted them to know that kindness mattered, that small gestures could change everything, that even in the darkest times there were still good people in the world. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing with it a snowstorm that blanketed Denver in 8 inches of heavy, wet snow. Marcus woke that morning to a trailer so cold that his breath came out in thick clouds, and Duke was pressed against him so tightly that they were practically one shivering unit. The space heater had died sometime in the night. "Okay," Marcus muttered, his teeth chattering. "Okay, we can handle this." But as he tried to troubleshoot the heater, he realized the problem was serious. The heating element had burned out. It would need to be replaced, or he'd need a new heater entirely. Neither option was immediately feasible. His savings from work, plus what remained of Thomas's gift and Harold's Christmas present, totaled about $215. A new heater would eat up a significant portion of that, and winter was just beginning. The reality of his situation crashed over him like the cold. He was 17, living in an unheated trailer in December, with no legal guardian, no permanent address, and no real plan for what happened when he turned 18 in 2 months. The fragile stability he'd built felt suddenly very fragile indeed. Duke whined and pressed his cold nose against Marcus's hand. "I know, buddy, I'm thinking." He bundled up in every layer he owned, wrapped Duke in the blanket, and they walked through the snow to the library. His fingers were numb by the time they arrived, and Mrs. Rodriguez took one look at him and immediately brought him a cup of hot coffee from the staff room. "Rough morning?" she asked gently. "Heater died," Marcus admitted. There was no point in pretending anymore. Mrs. Rodriguez had figured out his situation weeks ago, though she'd never said anything directly. She was quiet for a moment, then sat down across from him at one of the study tables. "Marcus, I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear me out before you respond, okay?" He nodded warily. "You're clearly intelligent. I've watched you read everything from classic literature to advanced physics. You're responsible. You show up here regularly, you follow rules, you respect the space, and you're only 17. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Have you thought about what happens in February when you turn 18? "I'll be an adult," Marcus said. "I can legally work full-time, maybe rent an actual room somewhere." "Maybe," Mrs. Rodriguez agreed. "Or maybe you finish high school first, get your diploma. That opens up more opportunities, better jobs, maybe even college with financial aid." Marcus shook his head. "I can't go back to school. I don't have a guardian. I don't have an address. And I can't risk them putting me in the foster system again, not this close to 18. "What if," Mrs. Rodriguez said slowly, "there was another option? There's a program I know about. It's run by a non-profit that helps homeless youth. They provide housing in supervised group homes, help you finish school, teach life skills, and prepare you for independence. It's not perfect, but it's warmer than a trailer in December, and it might give you a real shot at a future." Marcus wanted to refuse immediately. He'd built something in that trailer. Fragile as it was his. Duke was his. His independence was hard-won and precious. The idea of giving it up, of submitting to someone else's rules and schedules, made his chest tight with anxiety. But then he looked at Duke, shivering in his blanket, and thought about the long winter ahead. He thought about Thomas Peterson's words. "Every ending is just another beginning waiting to happen." "I'd have to give up Duke," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "Group homes don't allow pets." Mrs. Rodriguez's expression turned sad but understanding. "I know that's an impossible choice, but Marcus, you're so close to aging out of the system. 2 months. What if you could give Duke to a foster family temporarily, someone who would take good care of him and give him back when you're established? And what if you use these 2 months to get your GED, to save money from a better job, to set yourself up properly?" "Do you know anyone who would foster Duke?" Marcus asked, not quite believing he was even considering this. "Actually, yes. My daughter and her husband have been looking to foster a dog. They have a house in Littleton with a fenced yard. I've told her about you and Duke." She pulled out her phone and showed Marcus photos. A modest suburban home, a grassy backyard, a young couple smiling at the camera. "They're good people, Marcus. They'd love him and give him back when you're ready." Marcus felt like he was standing at a crossroads, and both paths looked equally terrifying. Stay independent and struggle through winter, risking his health and Duke's. Or accept help, temporarily give up the things he'd fought so hard to keep, and trust that there could be something better on the other side. Duke looked up at him with those soulful brown eyes, and Marcus made a decision that felt like both surrender and bravery. "Can I meet them first? Your daughter and her husband. I need to know Duke will be safe, that he'll be happy." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "Of course. I'll set it up for tomorrow. And Marcus, this isn't giving up. This is being smart. It's being brave enough to accept help when you need it." That night, in the frigid trailer, Marcus held Duke close and told him everything. The dog couldn't understand the words, but he seemed to sense the emotion behind them. He licked Marcus's face and pressed against him, offering the unconditional love that had sustained them both through the hardest months of their lives. "It's not forever," Marcus whispered into Duke's fur. "I promise it's not forever." The Rodriguez family lived in a quiet subdivision in Littleton, about 30 minutes south of Denver. Mrs. Rodriguez had driven Marcus and Duke there on a Saturday afternoon, the December sun providing light but little warmth. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, Duke in the back, his stomach churning with anxiety and doubt. "They're really good people," Mrs. Rodriguez assured him for the third time. "My daughter Sarah is a veterinary technician and her husband Mike teaches high school biology. They've been wanting a dog for years, but wanted to make sure they were ready for the commitment." Marcus nodded, but couldn't bring himself to respond. Every instinct screamed at him to tell Mrs. Rodriguez to turn around, to take them back to the trailer, to keep what little they had, rather than risk losing everything. But he forced himself to remember the bitter cold of the broken heater, the way Duke had shivered through the night, the reality that winter had barely begun. The house was a modest ranch-style home with beige siding and a red door. Before Mrs. Rodriguez had even put the car in park, the front door opened and a young couple emerged. Sarah, who looked like a younger version of her mother with kind eyes and dark hair pulled into a ponytail, and Mike, a tall man with an easy smile and wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Marcus," Sarah said warmly as they approached the car. She crouched down immediately to Duke's level as he stepped out. "And this is Duke." "Hey there, handsome boy." Duke, usually cautious with strangers, surprised Marcus by wagging his tail and sniffing Sarah's extended hand with interest. She let him investigate her thoroughly before gently scratching behind his ears in exactly the spot he loved. "Mom told us about you both," Mike said, addressing Marcus directly. "We want you to know up front. This isn't us taking your dog. This is us helping you take care of him until you're in a position to have him back. He's your dog, Marcus. Always will be." The words, simple as they were, made Marcus's throat tighten. "I need to know he'll be safe, that he'll be happy." "Come inside," Sarah invited. "Let us show you around, and you can see where he'd be staying. You can visit whenever you want. That's non-negotiable. And when you're ready to take him back, we'll help you with that transition too." The house was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and family photos on the walls. Sarah and Mike gave Marcus a complete tour, showing him the fenced backyard where Duke could run, the soft dog bed they'd already purchased and placed near the fireplace, the cabinet full of toys and treats. "We want to do this right," Sarah explained, as Duke explored the house with curious enthusiasm. "We'll keep you updated constantly, photos, videos, whatever you need. We can set up a video call schedule so Duke can see you regularly. Dogs understand more than people think." They spent 2 hours there that afternoon. Marcus watched as Duke played in the backyard, chasing a tennis ball Mike threw, his tail wagging with a joy Marcus hadn't seen in months. He watched as Sarah checked Duke over with professional care, noting that he'd gained weight and his coat looked healthier than in the photos Mrs. Rodriguez had shown her. "You've done an amazing job with him," Sarah told Marcus seriously. "In really difficult circumstances, you've kept him healthy and happy. That takes dedication and love." When it came time to leave, Marcus's resolve nearly broke. He knelt in the backyard, Duke coming immediately to his side and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. "I'm going to come back for you," he whispered fiercely. "I promise, this is temporary. I'm going to get myself together, really together, and then we'll have a real home, with a yard like this, and you'll have everything you deserve." Duke licked his face, tail wagging, trusting completely. The drive back to Denver was quiet. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't try to fill the silence with platitudes, and Marcus was grateful for that. When they reached the library, she turned to him. "The youth program has an opening," she said. "They can take you on Monday if you're ready. It's a house with 5 other teenagers, all working toward their GEDs or finishing high school. There are counselors, structure, rules, but also warmth, regular meals, and support." Marcus stared out the window at the darkening sky. In 2 days, he'd be leaving his trailer, his $1 investment that had sheltered him, the space where he'd found Thomas's gift, the first place that had felt like his in 8 months. "What about my stuff? The trailer? You can keep your important belongings. The trailer itself, that lot isn't safe for long-term storage, Marcus. But I talked to Harold Peterson. He's willing to keep it on his property. Says when you're ready, when you have your own place, he'll help you move it there if you want it. Marcus turned to look at her. Why are you doing all this? Why do you care? Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes glistened. Because 20 years ago I was a young woman who came to this country with nothing, and strangers helped me. They taught me English, helped me find work, encouraged me to go to school. I became a librarian because I wanted to help people the way I was helped. When I see you, Marcus, I see someone worth investing in. I see potential and strength and goodness, and I see someone who just needs a chance. That Sunday, Marcus's last night in the trailer, he packed his few possessions carefully. Thomas's journal and the photos went into his backpack, wrapped in plastic for protection. His clothes, his mother's multi-tool, his phone charger, everything fit into 2 bags. He cleaned the trailer one last time, leaving it as neat as he could, a thank you to Thomas and Harold both. He placed a note on the small counter, weighing it down with one of Thomas's lucky coins. Thank you for the beginning. I'm going to make you proud. Marcus Webb, December 2024. That night, he lay awake for hours, saying goodbye to the space that had saved him. In the morning, Mrs. Rodriguez would pick him up and take him to the youth home. In the morning, everything would change again. But maybe, Marcus thought as he finally drifted off to sleep, maybe change was exactly what he needed. 6 months later, Marcus stood outside the Denver Public Library on a warm June morning, a diploma folder tucked under his arm and a sense of purpose in his stride that would have been unrecognizable to the desperate teenager who'd bought a rusted trailer for $1. The youth program had been harder than he'd expected, not the academics, which he'd excelled at, but the emotional work. The counselors had pushed him to talk about his mother's death, about the fear and anger he'd been carrying, about the trauma of homelessness and the fierce independence that made asking for help feel like failure. There had been nights when he'd wanted to run, to leave the structured environment and return to the freedom of the streets. But every time he'd reached that breaking point, he'd video called Duke. Sarah and Mike had kept their promise, sending daily photos and setting up weekly video chats. Seeing Duke happy and healthy, playing in the yard, sleeping on his comfortable bed by the fireplace, that had given Marcus the strength to stay. He'd earned his GED in March, scoring in the 95th percentile. His counselor, a former social worker named Patricia, had immediately pushed him to apply for community college scholarships. You're smart, Marcus. Really smart. Don't waste that. He'd also kept his job at Mr. Nguyen's restaurant. Though he now worked there on a more regular schedule, Mr. Nguyen had been thrilled to learn Marcus was in school and had even given him a raise to $9 an hour. Education important, he'd said firmly. You study hard, you work hard, good things come. And good things had come, slowly but surely. Through the youth program, Marcus had connected with a vocational counselor who'd helped him apply for an apprenticeship with a local HVAC company. The pay was good, the training was comprehensive, and it was a career with real growth potential. He'd start in July, right after his 18th birthday. He'd also found a studio apartment, tiny but affordable with his new apprenticeship salary, and some assistance from a housing program for former foster youth. The lease started in 2 weeks. It had a small yard, and the landlord had approved his request to have a dog. Today was the day he'd been working toward for 6 months. Today, he was bringing Duke home. Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from the library, right on schedule. She'd continued to mentor him throughout his time in the youth program, checking in regularly, offering advice, celebrating his victories. Now she smiled broadly as she approached. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ready." Deal. The drive to Littleton felt both longer and shorter than Marcus remembered. When they pulled up to the Rodriguez house, he could see Duke in the window and his heart swelled. The dog's tail started wagging before Marcus even got out of the car. Sarah and Mike met them at the door, and Duke burst out, launching himself at Marcus with unbridled joy. Marcus dropped to his knees, laughing and crying at the same time, as Duke licked his face, whined and wiggled with happiness. "He knew," Sarah said, her own eyes wet. The moment we started packing his things this morning, he knew something was happening. They sat in the living room. Marcus, unable to stop petting Duke, relearning the feel of his fur, the weight of his head, the trust in his eyes. "He's been wonderful," Mike said. "We're going to miss him like crazy, but we're so happy for both of you." Sarah handed Marcus a folder. "This is all his medical records, his vaccination schedule, and information about the vet we've been taking him to. He's completely healthy, up to date on everything, and we want to keep in touch if that's okay with you. Maybe Duke could come visit sometimes?" "I'd like that," Marcus said honestly. "You've taken such good care of him. I can never thank you enough." "You already have," Sarah replied. "You showed us what real love and commitment look like. You gave up what you treasured most to make sure he was safe. That's the kind of person we want in our lives." Before they left, Mike pulled Marcus aside. "I teach at South High School," he said. "We have a program where we bring in speakers to talk to at-risk students. Would you consider sharing your story sometime? I think these kids need to hear that there's hope, that there's a way forward." Marcus considered it. 6 months ago, he would have been mortified at the idea of being so vulnerable. But he thought about Thomas's journal, about Harold's kindness, about all the people who'd helped him when he needed it most. "Yeah," he said, "I'd be honored." The new apartment was small but clean, with afternoon light streaming through the windows. Marcus had already moved in his few possessions, and Harold Peterson had helped him set up a used futon he'd bought at a thrift store. The old man had become a regular presence in Marcus's life, filling a grandfather-shaped hole he hadn't known was there. Now, as Marcus opened the door and Duke trotted inside, exploring every corner with his nose, Marcus felt something he'd been chasing for nearly a year: peace. That evening, Harold stopped by with a housewarming gift, a framed photo of the old trailer, cleaned up and sitting in Harold's backyard. "For when you're ready," Harold said. "It'll be waiting for you. Maybe someday you'll want to restore it, use it for camping trips of your own." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, accepting the photo with gratitude. "Someday." As the sun set over Denver, Marcus sat on his futon with Duke beside him, looking around his small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was his, legally, securely, completely his. He pulled out his phone and opened his digital journal, adding a new entry. 6 months ago, I bought a rusty trailer for $1 and found a message from the past that changed my future. Thomas Peterson left me more than money. He left me hope. He reminded me that every ending is a beginning, that kindness echoes across time, and that even in our darkest moments, we're not alone. Today, I have a home. I have my best friend back. I have a job, an education, and a future. But more than that, I have something I lost when my mom died. I have faith that good people exist, that community matters, and that one small act of kindness, whether it's selling a trailer for $1, leaving a time capsule for a stranger, or fostering a dog for a scared kid, can change everything. I'm going to pay it forward. However I can, whenever I can, I'm going to be for someone else what Thomas, Harold, Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah, Mike, Mr. Nguyen, and so many others were for me. Because that's how we survive, that's how we thrive, not alone but together. This isn't the end of my story, it's just the beginning of the next chapter. And I'm ready. Duke's head rested on Marcus's leg, the dogs breathing slow and peaceful. Outside, the city lights twinkled in the gathering darkness. Inside, a young man who'd been lost had finally found his way home. If you've made it this far, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next stories. Leave us a comment, letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Your support inspires us to keep creating content like this. Thank you for being here with us.